Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector as we explore their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry. This week on the podcast, we're joined by Sam Peterson, Director of Spacecraft Operations at Firefly Aerospace and former Swedish Space Corporation Business Development Director. With a military background, Sam's extensive industry experience has taken him on an incredible journey through the space sector. He's been involved in some enormous projects that we'll discuss later in more detail. In this episode, we dive into Sam's very unique space origin story and the path that led him to Firefly, an end-to-end space transportation company. By designing, manufacturing, and operating reliable launch and spacecraft vehicles, Firefly are committed to enabling sustainable, affordable, and convenient access to space for small payloads.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, yes, me too. Very good, thanks. Really appreciate you joining me at 7 o'clock in the morning on your end.
My pleasure.
Oh, great. Well, it's our pleasure. Yeah, really excited to speak to you today. I've spoken to the team that you're familiar with. I know you've got some really interesting experience in the industry that I'm really looking forward to discussing with you.
Well, thank you.
So, to begin, just to give the listeners a bit of an overview of you, why don't we start from the beginning? So, tell us about the early days of Sam Peterson. So, where you started in life, where you grew up, school, college, and how you then found your way into your early career.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, so I grew up in Wisconsin, and I think for Americans, they probably know where Wisconsin is, but maybe since you have a very international audience, so Wisconsin is kind of in the middle of the U.S. and very far north. It's in the north of Chicago, if you know where Chicago is. And we get, let's say, all four seasons quite distinctly in Wisconsin. So the summers are hot, the winters are very cold with a lot of snow, but it's a nice place to grow up. It's very rural. There's a lot of farms. I lived near Lake Wisconsin, which is about a half hour outside of the capital, Madison, when I was growing up. And it was a great place to grow up. And early in life, I got a love for science fiction from, I guess Star Wars and Star Trek were the things of my generation that kind of made people interested in space. And I was no different than, a lot of other kids my age, I guess, in that regard. And yeah, I mean, I was just fascinated by space from an early age. And I guess, the real space side, not the science fiction side, one of the earliest memories I have is when I was in third grade is when the Challenger disaster happened. And I remember very distinctly how they, brought all of us kids into the room because, the teacher was going to space and we all were watching in the classroom as that shuttle disaster happened, and exploded live on television. And it was very, very shocking for, I must have been about 8 years old at the time. And yeah, but then I guess, fast forwarding a little bit from my childhood to, how I got into the industry, I joined the Army out of high school. So I didn't go directly into college. I was 17 when I graduated high school and I joined the Army. And in the Army, that's where I learned satellite communications. So I got exposed to a lot of different aspects of, I guess, geostationary satellites. I worked in a tactical environment where we had like a satellite system that was inside of a van on the back of a Humvee, and you would go drive out into the desert and set up the communications links for, the deployed units. And I worked at a strategic site where it was, a fixed SATCOM site, and it was like what in the industry we would call a teleport, where the communications links all come in and they're all going out to these tactical units and these Navy ships and things. And then I was also a satellite controller. So learned how to, manage the bandwidth on the satellites and how to, bring on multiple users and how the network is managed and things like this. And I did 7 years in the Army. So that's two tours. So it was a little over 7 years, but 2 4-year tours. And I didn't actually go to college really until I got out of the Army. I mean, I took a couple of classes here and there, but I really started going to college after getting out of the Army. And here in the US, we have something called the Montgomery GI Bill. It's one of your benefits you get for being in the Army. And that helped to pay for my college then. And I did that while I was actually, when I first got out, we moved back to Wisconsin. So I was newly married when I got out of the Army. And we just decided to move back where I had grown up, because I'd met my wife when I was stationed overseas, and she was living in the US for the first time at this point. So we moved back where my family was, where I grew up in Wisconsin, and there wasn't really any space related jobs to be had in that area. The industry's not really big in Wisconsin. And I also didn't have a degree. So it was difficult, even with my experience from the Army, to break into the industry, shall we say, or to do anything really related to the industry. So I managed an automotive store for a couple of years, first getting started in kind of sales, and then getting my own store to manage, and learning how to, do all the aspects. It was like running a small business, even though it was, part of a chain and it was owned by somebody else. I managed my own location, but I eventually found my way into defense contracting work, because managing a tire store, I didn't really have that much time for school, which was kind of one of my goals. So some of my friends from the Army had helped me to get my first defense contracting job at this point, and that's where I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, and I was working mostly night shift, and I was going to the University of Maryland, which was one of, I think, about 3 different choices that we had to go to college on base. So there wasn't a lot of options. You had to take what they had available at the education center on the base, but it was a way for me to get my degree, and also I was getting additional experience in the industry at this point. And so we lived in Japan for, I guess, about 3 years. And then after I finished my bachelor's degree, I took another contract job in Germany. And we moved back over to Germany, where my wife's mother was living at the time. So we lived close to her family then. And then I finished a couple of master's degrees while I was working for 4 years in that contract job. And that's kind of, I guess, how I got into the industry initially. But then a big transition happened when I got an opportunity to work at the European Space Agency. And it was really kind of a stroke of luck, I guess you might say. A recruiter reached out to me from one of the companies that was there, and I had no idea this was even an option for me. And I remember LinkedIn was pretty new. This was probably 2011, 2010, somewhere around there, that he contacted me. And he just reached out and said, "Hey, your profile looks interesting, and I'm recruiting for this job for ground data systems at the European Space Agency. And if you're interested, just contact me, please." And I remember looking at that, and I remember sitting down, and I was having a coffee with my wife, and I said, "This looks like a fascinating job. I'm going to get to do all these cool things at ESA that they have here." But down at the bottom, they listed all these nationalities, and American wasn't one of them. So I immediately thought I wasn't even qualified to apply for the job, and maybe the guy had made a mistake and didn't understand that I was a U.S. citizen. But after talking it through over coffee, I said, what's the worst that can happen? He can tell me that I'm the wrong nationality, and then I'm no different than I am right now. But if I contact him, maybe, just maybe, it might work out. And so that's what I did. I sent him my resume via email, and if you could consider your email to be a cover letter, my cover letter said, "Hey, thanks for reaching out. I've attached my resume as you requested. I'm American. They probably won't hire me, but thanks anyway." And yeah, so all the things you read about how your cover letter has to say this, that, or the other, I guess maybe that's not always true. Because yeah, I ended up getting the opportunity of a lifetime to go. And for 8 years, then I worked at longer than I was even in the Army. I worked at the European Space Agency, and I got to be exposed to a lot of different types of missions, and worked with some really great people doing some really amazing things. And that really kind of changed the course, I would say, of my career. That's what I would almost consider that to be my entry into what you would call the space industry. Because I know I have a lot of friends from the military, and they have good careers, but they're tangential to the kind of work that you guys recruit for, and the kind of work that I'm doing now. And I keep in touch with a lot of them, but it's like a different part of the industry. So it's like I made a shift from one part of the industry to another at that time.
Wow, that is
you have such interesting experience. That must, as you said, as a child, this is such a common theme that we get of people in childhood loving Star Wars and Star Trek and kind of dreaming of space. To go on and to join the army at such a young age, and to then it just sounds like it just snowballed, living in Japan, living in Germany, having all this incredible experience. Couple of masters, you dropped that in very casually, very, very impressive work. And I really love kind of the story of how the ESA reached out to you on LinkedIn and you didn't think you were qualified. I think that's a really common theme. And I think a lot of people listening will be happy to hear that, because it's so common for people to count themselves out before they've even applied and think, oh, here's X, Y, and Z reason, like you, because you were American, you didn't think that you would fit the criteria. But I think this is a very good example of, don't listen to the self-doubt. If someone is, especially in this case, someone had reached out for you, I think that just really shows the importance of just saying yes to opportunities, and don't be the one to say no to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have a word for it. They call it imposter syndrome, and I think a lot of us have that. I know I have it. Like, I think when I worked at ESA, I remember the first 2 years, I kept thinking like, they're going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I mean, I did. I had the technical background, and I was doing things that I was familiar with. Well, I was also learning new aspects of it. But I remember the whole first couple of years, I was just like, wow, do I really belong here? These people are so much different than me. And it turned out that I did belong there, but it took a lot of self-convincing on my part, and I think a lot of people in our industry and a lot of people in general have this kind of, self-doubt, and you just have to work through it. You have to overcome that and say, hey, I can give this a try. I think it was Richard Branson that said, if somebody offers you a job and you don't feel like you're qualified for it, take the job and learn how to do it, and I think that's a good mentality to have in life. I mean, we're all born not knowing things, and we learn as we go, and just have that, that passion to learn new things and to try to accomplish things, and really you can do anything.
Yeah. 100%. What you just said reminded me of a study I read. I won't quote the statistics because I honestly don't remember them exactly, but they did a survey of CEOs, and they asked them kind of what their number one concerns or worries were in themselves, in their job. And the number one worry among CEOs was that people would realize that they had no idea what they were doing, which actually was very comforting, I thought, when I read that, because it just makes you realize it's all the way to the top, and it just kind of shows when you read stuff like that it is, when it's coming from yourself, it's usually baseless. It's you look at these CEOs and you think, you've got it all together, you know what you're doing. But then when you ask them, and when they're in surveys like this, everyone is deep down doubting themselves to a degree. But yeah, as you said, it's just about saying yes to opportunities and kind of learning on the job, and that's how you kind of grow the skills. And I think that's how you've maybe got to where you are now. It's some incredible experience, and it sounds like you just said yes, and it's eventually led you to where you are now, working for Firefly Aerospace. I think now would be a great time for you to kind of maybe just tell the listeners a bit about Firefly Aerospace, kind of what you guys do, how you fit into the space sector, and as well where you see yourselves developing over the next 5 years.
Well, yeah, thanks. Firefly is really a fantastic company, and it's a completely new experience for me. I've only been here a few months now, and coming from the military and ESA, and then I worked for the Swedish Space Corporation for a period as well. These are organizations that have been around a long time and have a lot of let's say good processes in place, and they're very set in how they do things. And coming to a startup like Firefly that has a completely different culture is really a new learning experience that I'm having right now, and it's fantastic because you have this is the first time I think in my whole career where I'm coming in, and the teams that I'm working with, I'm like the old guy. I remember just about every job I had, even up to most recently Swedish Space Corporation. When I came in, most of the people I was working with were older than me. I was often the young guy on the team. And then we did hire some younger people so we had a good mix at SSC after a bit. But the business development team was mostly maybe 10 years older than me when I first started. But here I'm coming in and there's this, this new generation, full of great ideas and this energy that they have to kind of, hey, let's just figure out how to do this, and if like I go travel for a couple of weeks and I come back, and all of a sudden they're doing something that they've gone a different direction now. I mean, things move really fast and it's fantastic. And so Firefly is, first and foremost, we're a space transportation company. So we had our successful alpha launch in October. I'm sure you probably saw some press about this, and very exciting, to reach orbit. There's a lot of companies that have ideas for rockets and trying to reach orbit, but there aren't many that have actually done it and are, on their way to repeating it, on a normal cadence the way that we are. And beyond just rocket launch, we're also getting into the satellite business, which is, why they brought me in. So I'm the director of operations for spacecraft, and we have 2 spacecraft missions that are currently in development. We have the Space Utility Vehicle, which is just like it sounds. It's designed to be like a space tug or a way to get your payload to various orbits or various places in space. And whether it's doing plane changes in LEO or taking it from a LEO launch and raising the orbit, it can do a lot of different things, and we're going to have our first demonstration of that later this year. But then once you get a little bit further away from the planet Earth, we have the Blue Ghost mission that we're working on, and this is really exciting stuff because we're going to land on the moon the middle of next year. And we're on schedule. Everything's all systems go, and we're going to be ready to take this mission to our nearest neighborhood, our nearest neighbor in the solar system. Middle of next year, we're taking 10 payloads to the lunar surface. So this will really, with these first Alpha, then SUV, then Blue Ghost, Firefly as a company will really demonstrate our vision of space transportation, everything from LEO to lunar and beyond. And it's really exciting to be part of a company that's doing these groundbreaking things at such a fast pace, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be so exciting what you guys are doing to be going to the 10 payloads to the moon. That's such exciting work. I've seen some of your guys behind the scenes video. I've seen their engine testing videos, and it just must be so exciting to be a part of. And I know, especially as you guys are really focused on kind of with these kind of launch vehicles, in-space vehicles, and the services that you're providing, there's a focus on kind of affordability, convenience, reliance, and predictability, really, to an extent, isn't it, in kind of the products that you're providing and the services. I think that's really, really important. It's really exciting to kind of see the work that you guys are doing, especially that behind the scenes videos. Really loved watching that and seeing the team. Everyone seems so engaged. As you said, you mentioned the culture. You can really see that, I think, from the videos of everyone kind of working together. It looks like such a lovely environment to work in. I think everyone is clearly so excited for this kind of joint mission that you're all on. It's incredible to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's and I mean, this is the first real kind of space transportation focused company that I've been a part of. So I'm seeing new aspects of the industry that obviously happened on missions that I've been involved with, but I'm seeing different different part of the mission life cycle, I would say. So it's really, you continue to learn new things. I've been in the industry for, God, I've lost count, more than 25 years. And it's a continual learning experience, and it's fantastic to see. Firefly is just a part of it. The industry as a whole is doing things these last few years that seemed impossible just a few years before. The way that rockets are coming back down and being retrieved now, and they're not just becoming space debris. And they have space debris removal missions that are happening, and you have the cost of reaching orbit is going down. And we're a big part of that with the way that our space transportation systems are much more cost effective, and they have to be. To be competitive in the market. There's other companies that'll take you to orbit much cheaper than it was just 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And that creates new business models because, a sensor, the spacecraft themselves are getting smaller and lighter and less expensive too. So you can build a spacecraft cheaper, you can get it to orbit cheaper. So if you have a mission concept that would have been way too cost prohibitive in the past, today you can probably get that up and running and do it within a budget that makes sense for your organization, whether it's a university or a government agency or a commercial entity. There's a lot of exciting things that can be done in space now.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're definitely getting to a point now where, well, I think we're past the point where we're seeing things, the impossible, it's not a word anymore. We're seeing things that we never dreamed of made possible. And I really love kind of to hear that, you're talking about the continued learning that you're experiencing. And I think that sounds like it's a theme of your career. You've had your fingers in so many pies over the years, and, you're now at a point where you're loving what you're doing. You're working for this incredible, innovative company, and you're seeing all this change and at the forefront of the change. I think that's amazing to see. So so speaking about where you are now, where you've kind of how you got to here, my favorite question that we ask our guests is, so now that you're embedded into the industry and you've got all this incredible experience, what is it that you love most about space out of everything that you've experienced? What would you say is the thing that you love the most?
I would have to say it's definitely the people, because the space industry has some of the smartest people, anywhere. And they just have this, mindset that they can change the world for the better. This can do, hey, that looks like it's hard, I'm going to go try to do that. And they do it, and so sometimes you fail along the way, but when you fail, you learn from that failure, and then you pick it up and you try again, the space industry is full of, companies that didn't reach orbit the first time, so they did it on their second try, like we did with our Alpha launch too. You can't give up just because you reach that first barrier. You got to break through those barriers, and that's something I see everywhere in the space industry, is this can-do attitude, this mindset that that we're making the world a better place through what we do.
Yeah, completely. I completely agree with you there, and I think anyone in the industry must. I can't see how anyone wouldn't agree with you. It's the collaborative mindset and the kind of shared passion everyone in the industry shares. And I think that's kind of why this podcast is so important, to kind of push that message out there and to get more people inspired, because more people could be a part of this industry. More people could be a part of these incredible things they're hearing about. I think these kinds of conversations, we're showing people how they can get into the industry, because I think when people kind of look at the end result, they think, I could never get there. I'm not, X, Y, and Z reasons why I can't. But I think the highlighting the steps and showing the progress and the journey really shows people that space is accessible. And that really is one of the big motives of us starting this podcast, is to kind of demystify space and make it accessible for everyone. And a really hot topic on that kind of point at the moment is the battle for talent, to new talent to join the industry, and kind of these diverse skills and these diverse backgrounds, and what more we can be doing to impact this. Personally, at EVONA, we think that we need to be impacting change at a much younger age through kind of STEM and STEAM initiatives, so that we can make sure that we're sustaining the growth of the sector for years to come by nurturing this talent and kind of drawing these skills into the sector. So from your experience, what do you personally feel that we could be doing differently across the industry, and as well as I said, at STEM level, with these kind of younger people, to impact change now and for future generations?
Well, I agree. I think it's very important to get the young people involved. And I like to see the way that kind of internships are changing, where they get to work on something meaningful. I remember when I was growing up and people said internship, it's like, oh, you get to be like the office assistant and fetch people coffee, and that was kind of that's what people thought, of internships. And I think, the other side of the pond, the Europeans kind of started to get this right a bit earlier. But I am seeing, things kind of following suit here in the US now too, where you have, like, at the European Space Agency, we had a whole cadre of young graduate trainees that would come in every year, and they would work on like a project, for 6 months or for a year, depending upon the duration of their contracts. But they really have like something that was theirs that they take ownership of. And the companies that were over there had similar things where they had these kind of rotational programs that they would bring in a new graduate and they would let them work in a technical part of the company for a little while, and they'd let them work in maybe marketing for a little while and get some exposure to management. And over the course of a year or sometimes 2 years, these programs would get them exposed to different parts of the company and get them feeling comfortable working on some of these different areas and figuring out really what they want to do. Because when you're that age, you go to college and they're like, hey, pick your degree program, and it's like, well, this is going to define who you are to some extent, and a lot of times at that age you don't know who you are yet. You're still kind of in the discovery process. So I think giving young graduates or even young students who come for the summer, or maybe they come and they work part-time while they're going to school, give them something to really work on that has meaning, that they can build their skill set with, build their understanding of what the company does. And a lot of times these young graduates or these student interns that come in, they're not going to end up working for your company in the future. They might not even work in this industry in the future, but having gotten that exposure help them along the way and to find out what it is that they do want to do. And I think that's the important part, is that for each of us to be able to find our own place, and to give those opportunities to to have an impact even at a very young age, and to feel like you're a part of it. You're not like just coming in and fetching somebody coffee.
Absolutely. I think you've really hit the nail on the head here, that I love exactly. You've made such a good point there. The way the internships, kind of the modern internship, it's the hands-on experience that is available to people. And it's not just getting coffee, as we've said, it's more than that now. There's so much more out there, and this incredible experience can really kickstart your career. And I think you also made a very important point. It was great to hear that people were kind of being moved throughout the companies, throughout different departments, because that is something else that we really try and promote, is there's more than one path into the space industry, and there's more than one department within the space industry. If someone came into this company and they got put in the marketing department or the operations department, that is a way to work in these incredible companies. And I think giving people that kind of comprehensive experience within the company and letting them actually roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and really join the team and kind of work with them, and not feel like you're the PA or what. So incredible for these young people to have that experience. I think something which I think is very important, that is a kind of a barrier to a lot of younger people, is obviously social media, huge. There's no getting away from it, no matter who you are. And I think the portrayal that people kind of promote on social media, and the way people put themselves out there on the internet when they're kind of promoting themselves, we always see the successes and the achievements and the product of the years of hard work and success, but people aren't very quick to kind of promote the work and the grind and the sacrifices that kind of led up to that. So something I think that I would love to hear from you, that I think would be really valuable to some of our younger listeners, who maybe are getting this kind of distorted view from online, because that is where most of us, a lot of people, that's the sole source that they get their information. So in the interest of transparency, failure is a very strong word, but in your experience, what would you say was your biggest failure to date, if you will call it that? What you learned from that? And then on the other side of the fence, what would you consider to be your biggest career achievement to date?
So I think these are tough questions too. This is some self-reflection to kind of come up with some different ideas of where you succeeded and where you failed, I guess. But I think when I think of a failure, and especially one that I learned from, I had an idea for a startup several years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, not quite, maybe. I think it was probably about 2014. So we had I was working at ESA at the time, and they had this ESA business incubator. And I went to a few meetings with this, and I met some of the other people that have actually been very successful starting up their companies, that were in the same kind of place as I was at the time. They were engineers that had ideas. They wanted to start a company, and I had this grand idea to start a company, and I went and pitched it to several different people. I got some angel investors that were actually interested and wanted to give me a little bit of money. But I actually turned their money down because I said, I don't want to take your money and then not be able to raise what I need to really start the company, going. But I learned a lot through the process of doing that. And from my time at business school, I had, some friends and colleagues, the cadre that I had studied with and so on. And I had kind of coached them through their businesses a little bit. And I felt like, hey, I can do this too. So then when I had my idea and I wrote up my business plan and I pitched it, and it was hard. It wasn't so easy, but along the way I learned what I had done wrong. I learned from, why I wasn't able to start the business, but then, going and working for other companies, I was able to take some of these things that I had learned through the process of trying to start my company and say, hey, this is how you can do it better. And this is how, with what we're doing here at this company, what I can do and how I can play a part. And I learned a lot through that process. But then, I guess on the other side, you asked about, what is my greatest success? And this one is actually harder for me to think about. I don't know, maybe just because, as I self-reflect, I try to figure out what I can do better in different situations a lot. And just kind of patting myself on the back isn't part of my personality, I guess, too much.
No.
But I guess it'd be hard to pick one, but maybe I'll talk about a few of the incredible missions that I worked on when I was at ESA. So when I started, they put me working on Herschel and Planck, and these were space observatories. And just a year earlier, I had been finishing up my master in space studies at Embry-Riddle. And I did a report for one of my classes on Lagrange points and how great they would be for different space missions. And then here I am at ESA, I'm working on Herschel and Planck, which are at Lagrange too. And I'm like, whoa, I just wrote a paper about this and now I'm doing this, and we took both of those missions through their end of life. And so we had continued operations for some years while I was there. And then we took first Herschel and then Planck through the end of life process. And both of them are now in, a solar centric orbit that's away from the Earth Moon system. So they won't get in the way of other missions like James Webb that want to go out to, to L2, although, the Lasigian orbits they're in are pretty big anyway, but yeah, they're completely away from our system where they won't, have an impact on future missions. And that was pretty cool to be part of that. And then, following on from Herschel and Planck, I got involved with Integral, and this was the mission that I worked on the longest while I was at ESA. I think I was on the Integral team for about 6 years of the 8 that I was there. So Integral is in a highly elliptical orbit. When I first started with the mission, the orbit was 72 hours, 3 days. And again, thinking about the end of life of the mission, they did an orbit lowering while I was working for the mission. It's now a 64-hour orbit. So instead of 9 days for 3 orbits, it now takes 8 days for 3 orbits, and they're kind of phased a third of the way around the Earth. It's pretty cool how they design the orbit. But more importantly, if memory serves, I haven't looked this up recently, but I think 2029 is the year that now that new orbit will decay to the point where it will come down somewhere in the far southern latitudes, along a latitude line that won't have any inhabited area. So it'll re-enter Earth, it'll burn up, and in case anything does reach, it'll splash down in the water. So they designed an orbit 15 years out, and did a maneuver that would then put the spacecraft in a position where it would properly be disposed of at the end of its life, which was pretty cool. And at Integral, one of the interesting things that I got involved was with a mission of that age. They had been around almost 20 years now, more than 20 years, but when I got started, it was a bit less. And they had a problem with RF interference. And when I got started working with them, I said, hey, we can do something about this. And there was a lot of doubt in the room, let's say, when I made that statement that we could do something about this. But we went through the painstaking effort of figuring out different other spacecraft that were actually interfering with Integral, and then going through the process of the ITU to talk to the people who were operating these other spacecraft and say, hey, you're interfering with us. Can we do something about this? And after many years of reaching out to different missions and identifying different ones, when I left, they didn't have much of an RFI problem at all anymore. And being that it had launched in as early as it had, and the design of spacecraft at that time, they didn't have a lot of onboard data handling. So if they get an RF interference, they're just losing data. They're up there and they're recording incredible things in the infrared and gamma rays and doing really cool science. and you could have an RF interference in the middle of that science, and then all of a sudden you don't have the data that you need. And that's the whole reason why the spacecraft is out there. So that was pretty cool to be an impact, on their mission that way. And then another family of missions that I got involved with was the Earth Explorer missions, and I worked on quite a lot of them. But most notably, I think, is the Sentinels. So I worked on the first 7 of the Sentinel missions. I did the end-to-end ground segment validation, proving out that everything was going to work, and each one was a little bit different. So there were some different challenges that we found along the way there. And I was involved in what we call the launch and early orbit phase of the mission, where the rocket takes off and everybody kind of sees that, and then you get the separation. Well, our job as spacecraft, operations teams happens after separation. So, everybody, hey, the launch was great, and then our job starts, and we have to take this thing out bring it into service, so they deploy the different systems that are on board, and they test them and make sure they work. You work through if there's any anomalies. So there's a lot of different processes involved with doing this, and I got to do this several times at ESA with the Sentinels and some other missions as well. And it was pretty cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool is an understatement. That is some incredible experience that you've been at the forefront of. I think the level of kind of collaboration and problem solving that you've just explained there across all of those missions is just incredible. And that must have been so amazing for you to be a part of. And I think even something really important, just to kind of go back to the earlier part of your question, even the way that the startup idea that you were talking about, even that, it sounds like it was a huge learning curve that then, kind of led you on to these incredible missions that you were a part of. And I think a really important takeaway is that, you said that you took what you learned from your experience and from that particular experience with the startup and your other experiences, and you took it on board, you kind of analyzed it in your head, went over it, and you went on to do some incredible things.
Well, thanks. I feel like I played a small part on some incredible missions.
Yeah, it's a group effort though. No, it's
Absolutely.
every single person that was involved, is responsible for the success of the mission. So don't downplay your part in that, I don't think. So I'm kind of on your incredible kind of space journey into the industry, a really valuable question that we ask our podcast guests is, what were the best resources that you identified and utilized over those kinds of years, whether that's courses, programs, mentors, things that kind of helped you segue into the space industry and to also progress within it?
So I go back to the earlier question, and it's really all about the people. The space industry is a very small community, and the people you work with at one company, you're going to cross paths with them. They'll be your collaborators, your customers, they'll be your competitors in some cases, and that'll come full circle throughout your career. I think, at least that's been my experience. So to me, it's all about building good relationships, and then that, over time that grows into a pretty big network that you can turn to people and say, hey, I'm having this problem, can you help me with it? Or, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this or help me with that? And it's a great community to be a part of. And to me, that's the differentiator is the people. And you can't, you hear it in I think any walk of life, that, don't burn your bridges when you leave someplace. But in the space industry, I think as small as the space industry is, that's even more true, because if you cause some disruption when you're leaving, one company or one job or one mission that you're working on or whatever the case may be, you're going to see those people again, so just treat people the way you want to be treated, the golden rule, I guess, and be part of these great things that are going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you just said, that is so true. Even I've been working in the industry for maybe 8 months now, maybe 9. And when I started, I was speaking to people on the podcast, we were connecting on LinkedIn, and I'm always, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, connecting with them. And something I very quickly started to notice was that everyone knows each other already. I was connecting thinking, oh, they are already connected with all these people that I've spoken with. And I think as I continue talking to people, the kind of level of, as you said, it's a relatively small community, but the kind of the connections within it. And as you said, I can imagine you would be constantly crossing paths with people that you've met. And like you said, as long as you've not burnt these bridges, those relationships must just be it must be incredible to see them build kind of throughout your careers. And I think something else really common, like you said, that the importance of the people and how incredible the people are in the sector is how everyone wants to build people up, boost them up and help them with whatever they're looking for, if that's kind of career development, professional, personal development, if they're kind of maybe further along in their career. I think people love what they do in this industry, and they're really keen to share that passion and knowledge to help, people that maybe are a few steps behind them on their journey to reach the heights that they've kind of got their eyes set on.
Absolutely. I think one more thing that I'd like to say is don't be afraid to make mistakes or to admit that you made a mistake, or to admit that you don't know something. If somebody asks a question and you're not sure, have the courage to say, hey, I don't really know the answer to that question. Let's figure it out together, or maybe we can find the answer over here. I've had a lot more good experiences, let's say, over the years with people who had that kind of an attitude. And then there's other people that I've met that they gave into the fear. So they would try to pretend like they knew the answer to the question, or they'd half answer the question and try to convince you that they're an expert in everything. And we're not all experts in everything. We're all on this journey together. So just be humble, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't really know that, and let's go look that up, or come back to me a little bit. I'm busy right now, but hey, I can help you to try to figure that out later, whatever the case may be. But don't try to pretend like you know something that you don't, because there's so many things out there, and we're not an expert in everything.
Yeah, definitely. That we've spoken to someone on the podcast before. I can't quite remember who it was, but we asked what the worst advice they'd ever been given was, and they said, fake it till you make it. Which to me, I usually quite like that phrase, but they said when you're in the space industry, to a certain extent, yeah, fake it till you make it in terms of confidence, maybe, but don't pretend you know things that you don't know, because it's, I think that's kind of the point you've just made, is it can only go so far faking it if when you're in this kind of industry. And I think that is a very important kind of nugget of wisdom, is being humble and allowing yourself to be vulnerable is so valuable. I think it's a really valuable trait that I think a lot of people do have to learn it, but it's the only way that you can truly learn and grow and learn in the areas that you genuinely need to as an individual, which is highlighted by the things that you don't know or you're maybe unsure of. So yeah, I think completely, kind of vulnerability and being humble is, as you said, very, very important. So still on the topic of how we can kind of help younger people and people who are at the kind of early stages of their career segue in, what advice would you give to someone from either a technical, or very importantly, I think something to talk about is maybe a non-technical background, who are looking to kind of pursue a career in the space industry?
I would just say, don't be intimidated. There's opportunities in the industry. We need all people of all backgrounds. So any company that's in the industry needs people that are doing finance or accounting or marketing or artwork, design, in addition to the very technical fields with engineer and science and things like this. But then there's also companies that are non-technical that are part of the industry, and I'll give a shout out to Daniel and my colleagues at the Astro Agency in the UK. So I sit on their advisory board, so I feel obliged to mention them a little bit. And but here you have a company that's bringing the message of space and cool space companies and organizations, because they're also promoting some of the UK space sector government programs and things too. And it's a marketing agency. So most of the people there don't have the same technical background, let's say, that the people at Firefly that I work with do, and that's okay. They're still part of the same industry, and so find your niche, find where you have a passion to do something cool in the industry, and just go do it. don't be intimidated. Don't get in your own way. Don't convince yourself that you're not qualified for this position that you think would be a lot of fun and have some growth and where you could contribute. Just go do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I signed up to do my English literature degree, I don't think I ever thought that it would, take me into the space industry, but here I am. And I think, like you said, it's a really, really important message that is, I think it's EVONA's kind of one of our really core messages, is that, there's space is for everyone, and there is space for everyone in the industry. And it's people of all backgrounds, people of all skills and experiences. And it's these unique and diverse skills and backgrounds, and as I said, experiences that are vital to the growth of the industry, because it's not all just rocket scientists, engineers, and astronauts. That is obviously it's a huge part of the industry, but when you look at the bigger picture, it's not the only element. And you need as you said, the finance department and an operations department and the marketing department it's a joint effort, because it's not just about the product, it's about how everyone kind of comes together and does their own bit, brings what they are really good at to the table, brings their own passions and talents to the table. And you don't have to be an engineer. That's something that I think is quite a common misconception, is, we hear a lot of people saying, oh, I'd love to work in space, but I'm bad at maths, or I'd love to work in the space industry, but I'm bad at science. But, I think it's something that I love kind of seeing people's reactions to, people who haven't had that thought process, seeing the kind of spark go off in their head that I have these skills and experiences and these talents that I can bring to the industry that can ultimately contribute to the success of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So Sam, to kind of round off, really loved speaking with you. I've loved hearing about your experiences and everything that you've been a part of, and kind of your take on everything. I really love your kind of view on the industry. So I would love to know, as my final question, what are your thoughts on the current status of the aerospace sector, and how do you see this evolving over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, first of all, that's a fantastic question too. And
Thank you.
if I could really accurately answer that question, I would know where to invest money so that I could have a fantastic retirement. But so I think what I'll speak to is the things that I see going on that are developing right now that I'm most excited about. And for maybe I'll try to come up with three of them. Let's say so lunar exploration, I think, is one of my passions, and that's what drove me to work here at Firefly, where I get to be involved with this Blue Ghost mission. Really exciting stuff. And beyond lunar exploration, the talk of kind of deep space exploration, eventually going to Mars, and the scientific missions that go even further out into the solar system than that. I think that this is a very exciting thing, and I think the technologies we're seeing are really making a difference. The next area I would say is making space more accessible. And this is launch. This is space transportation. It's what we're doing at Firefly and other companies as well. But then also the cleaning up space, I think. So the whole space debris problem has come to the forefront because these big constellations are going up. When we were putting up 1 or 2 satellites, at a time, and launches didn't happen very often, space was big and it didn't seem like a big problem. And then you had the collision with the Cosmos satellite. What was it, about 2009, I think. You probably look it up and find out that I got my date wrong, but if memory serves, it was a little over a decade ago. We had a full-on collision of 2 satellites, and there's a lot of studies that went into how that debris spread out. So seeing the early developments that we have in debris removal, and seeing the emphasis on making sure that you have your kind of end of life for your mission planned out, to me is a big shift in the industry, and I like to see where it's going, and I'd like to see how that unwinds in the coming years. So I think that was 3 different things that are developing in the industry. There's so many things going on that I could probably continue to list 10 things going on in the industry, but I think that's a pretty good subset to speak about the excitement and new things, new challenges going on.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, if I had to choose 3, I think you've just chosen my 3. I think, as you said, kind of the lunar exploration, and especially the phrase deep space exploration, just gives me tingles. It's just the most exciting thing. And the other day when we saw the ancient universe breaker galaxies, I think they were called, kind of seeing things like that. And when we was it the James Webb Telescope found the supermassive black hole that was singing? Did you hear about that?
I didn't read about that one, no, but it does
It
sound
was,
fascinating.
yeah, I wrote an article on it, so I'll send it to you after this. It's just incredible, and things that are out there. And I think that, yeah, completely, that is, I think, undeniably one of the most exciting things. And I think a very good closing point from you is the cleaning up space and the sustainability of space, because that is something that I was surprised to learn when I joined the industry. As you said, it's causing these collisions. It's so congested in there. And I think as we're kind of launch activity and there's so much going on in space and there's so many satellites kind of in orbit, I think, companies like Firefly, who are putting this emphasis and promoting the importance of kind of sustainable space exploration and getting people thinking about that, I think is really, really important. And I think a perfect closing comment for the podcast interview.
Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me to be participating in your podcast and to share, my thoughts on the industry, my perspective, and hopefully it, helps some of your audience to find their way into the industry, as you say, with the origin stories. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We hope so too. It's been our absolute pleasure to have you. Really appreciate you joining so early in the morning. You've got your whole day ahead of you.
Indeed. But it is Friday, right? So
yes, it is. Thank you for reminding me. Lovely. Well, Sam, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me and hope to speak soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
excellent. Talk to you again soon.
Yes, definitely. Bye.